All right, CNT125, we're working on Chapter 10. We were just mentioning that one of the most important things we can do against these social engineering is employee training. Employee training, frequent reminders about, hey, don't click on those links. Hey, watch out holding the door for somebody else. Make sure you're logging out of your system when you're not there. Those kind of things. Continual training, continual updates, and reminders and tips. Remember, at some point in time down the road, you'll be part of an IT team, and this might be part of responsibilities that you have of training people or reminding people or creating training about clicking on a link or not clicking on a link and so forth. Insider threat is a big threat to a company. Somebody that is an employee in the company or former employee, contractor, or associate that might have had access or might have had access into things in the company. These people can sometimes develop malicious intent. Maybe they're disgruntled, maybe they're going to be fired, maybe they know they're going to be fired, and these people that have access have a high risk, if you will, pose a high risk to the organization, data, knowledge, login, those kind of things. So insider threat can be a significant danger to network resources, that sort of thing. So some things that companies can do to reduce these risks are things like background checks. Before somebody's hired, doing simple background checks, and in some cases, maybe even security clearance checks. As I like to tell people, if you have a clean record, keep a clean record. If you don't have a clean record, it's not the end of the world. Be willing to maybe explain maybe why any sort of incidents occurred, but do be prepared down the road to have background checks completed as you either enter a company or start working for a company. If you work for a school, you're obviously going to have background checks count of students in the building, but even an IT firm that might consult with a school, you still might have background checks because you're going into a building. So just be aware of that. And if you go on to some instances where you might need a security clearance, they start increasing the circle of people that they check with. Neighbors, teachers, that sort of thing. They start checking any sort of reasons why you shouldn't be hired, if you will. Any sort of reasons that you shouldn't be trusted with company data, that sort of thing. Another thing that companies can do is principle of least privilege. In other words, give you just enough access for just enough time to do what you need to do. No extra access, no extra time, that sort of thing. Least privilege, if you will. Checks and balances on employee behavior. If you have a facility where there's a lot of people working shift, Monday through Friday, blah time to blah time. Sometimes there's scheduled access. You try to log in after your shift ends, you can't. You try to log into Saturday and you can't. And sometimes mandatory vacations, job rotations, okay, you're doing another shift or another location, and it changes up what they have access to. So things aren't as predictable. Data loss prevention solution: identify sensitive data network, prevent it from being copied to flash drive or transmitted off the network, and limiting what it's able to do. So one of those, trying to make sure we're keeping a hold of the really important stuff for our facility. So those are things that can be done to minimize the whole people risk, if you will. So just be advised, or just kind of have it in your brain down the road that these might be things that are happening to you as the new employee until you work your way in further. As we move on to technology risks, we want to be aware of a couple of technology risks that could be security problem in a company. And there is such a thing as the denial of service attack. Now, there's a couple different styles that they're going to mention here, so we'll kind of mention those for familiarity's sake. Denial of service: legitimate user unable to access normal resources because of attackers' intervention, and there's different ways this can be done. So maybe I'm trying to log in, maybe I'm trying to get company resources, and I just cannot. And that's because there is some sort of attack going on maybe a web server that I'm trying to log in or utilize. That's kind of the simplest explanation. But there are a couple different styles. These are the different styles here. So again, let's just be familiar. I would say just make sure you can match them up as to what they are at this point. Your distributed denial of service. This would be multiple systems around an area or around the globe, if you will, have in them some sort of bot, maybe transported via malware, that are designed to kick on and do a specific task on a certain day and a certain time. And it might be it sits idle on your machine for a couple months or a couple weeks, and then it kicks on to start sending, maybe even like requests or pings or things of those nature, all to one entity. But we're talking thousands upon thousands of people around the globe hitting one resource with all kinds of requests. And this might literally overwhelm the system and cause it to shut down. And if that's the main web server for a company, maybe they sell products. If that's the main web server for the company and that goes down, people cannot order products or conduct business, and they've been brought offline, and their business has been disrupted, and they might lose revenue. Blah blah blah. That's the idea behind your distributed denial of service attack. Distributed reflective, these are going to bounce off of unknowing individuals. So these are just, hey, I'm just a average Joe Schmo, and they're literally reflecting off of me to a web server to make it look like it's coming from legit users, if you will. And the same result, trying to overwhelm this server here so it can't respond to people's requests. And as I like to say, if you deal with a Windows server, when Windows servers gets overwhelmed or Windows computer gets overwhelmed, what's it do? It typically shuts down, reboots, kind of thing. And during that shutdown reboot process, they're offline, they've lost business, etc., etc. Amplified, you do small requests and it triggers larger requests. And again, you're bouncing off at a small, simple DNS request, and these do larger ones too. Okay, so again, it's another reflective type thing where it's making it look like these are all legit users out here, if you will, responding to or causing a resource, lots of requests to overwhelm the server. Your permanent, this would be damaging maybe the firmware on a type of device. Think about in the lab room, we have the operating system running on our routers and switches, and that's on the use the flash card, the compact flash card kind of thing. If I damage that OS, that router, that switch cannot function. So if I can find a way to damage that OS on a router, switch, server, or I'll just say router, switch, that sort of thing, that main connectivity device does not work, so your connection for that site, that company, will not work, will not function. And last but not least would be a friendly denial of service attack. This can happen unknowingly. A lot of people like to do a lot of, I'll say, holiday shopping right after Thanksgiving on Cyber Monday. Sometimes even on the Friday, Black Friday, if you will. A lot of people like to shop virtually for items for the holiday, gifts for the holiday. And if a certain company advertises a really good sale, they might get so many people checking it out that it overwhelms their web server, that sort of thing. I recall a year or two ago, my mom asking me about, she was trying to order something off of a blah site. I'll just leave it like that. And she goes, it's running very slowly. And it was literally on a Cyber Monday. And I'm like, I think they're just overwhelmed with the sale that they were running, the deal they were running. Lots of people were checking out and their resources could not handle it. So it was running very, very slow. It didn't shut them down, but it was running very, very slow. But if you keep doing, you might overwhelm the server. It shuts down, reboots, blah, blah, blah. We have some other technology risks that we might run into. On-path attack or man in the middle. Here, this a lot of times happens on something like a wireless network where I would pose as a valid access point, and I would basically have your traffic run through me and then into the wireless network. And during that process, I might be able to capture, glean, Wireshark, if you will, information off and maybe potentially find usernames, passwords, that sort of thing. And from that, I now have some information. That's your man in the middle. You have somebody posing as the middle person. Deauthentication attack. You send fake deauthentication frames to an access point, and that triggers the deauthentication process and knocks off clients for them to essentially revalidate and reconnect while I'm just doing a Wi-Fi denial of service attack. That's what I'm basically doing. And with that, if I bump everybody off, as you see down here, I'm going to roll back a slide. I could then have them connect to me, acting like I'm a legit access point, and now I run all their traffic through me. So those might actually be done in tandem, if you will. There are some protocols out there that are insecure. Things like FTP are not secure, HTTP is not, Telnet is not, early forms of simple network management protocol are not. So either secured versions of or newer protocols might be more secure or are more secure. So in a network, a lot of times things like FTP are filtered, denied. And the idea is you're not using this insecure protocol. If you're using a secured one, okay, we might let that through. And same thing with Telnet, that sort of thing. You might let SSH through to a certain area, but you're definitely denying Telnet. And it's the whole idea of I'm trying not to let these insecure protocols move through the network. There is such a thing as DNS poisoning or DNS spoofing, altering DNS records on a DNS server to redirect them to a web server that might be doing some phishing where hey, can you plug in your name and password we can just verify your identity, and you're just siphoning off that information. DNS is going to be pointing them to DNS poisoning is going to be pointing them to a fake server that looks real so they can pull information off. Backdoors. Some software might contain a backdoor security flaw. Unless that is identified and updated or patched, if you will, that could be open as a exploit for a hacker to take advantage of, especially if you're running that software for a long period of time without it being updated, which is one of the reasons they like update, patch, update, patch kind of thing. So that could be another type of technology risk. Alrighty, we'll come back and we'll start looking at some malware risks.